weeks, it is completely normal to still have 1 or 2 night feeds. If your baby, however, was previously only having 1 feed, or if she was even sleeping through, as some babies will be at this age, then we can look at possibly resettling at one of those night feeds instead. Otherwise, we might need to look at other reasons as to what's causing the wake. It may be that she is waking due to her temperature not being quite right, or she may benefit from having some white noise to help transition through those sleep cycles when she rouses. She may have had too much or too little day sleep, and that is causing her to wake frequently overnight. But overall, it is still completely normal to have 1 or 2 feeds a night, but we can certainly look at ruling out some other things. Our programs do go over the ideal day sleep, and so that we can make sure that those wakes are not due to something to do with her naps rather than actual genuine hunger.
We get asked this question quite regularly, and we do find that some people kind of get a bit stuck in a situation where their babies are going to bed around 9 or 10 p.m. at night, and maybe they are sleeping quite well through till sort of 6ish, 7 the next morning. However, we do get asked a lot also how they can bring bedtime earlier, because for some people, I know for myself, I struggle to stay awake till 10 p.m. and a lot of our customers really enjoy that their babies can go to bed at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening, and then they sort of get a bit of grown-up time, if you like. They can spend time with their husband or their older children. We generally find, so we aim for a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. day with our sleep programs, and that's all focused on when your baby is napping during the day and for what lengths at each nap, and that's all very age appropriate, so that 7 p.m. rolls around and they're perfectly ready to go to sleep for the night at that point. We do know that babies sleep their deepest, most restorative sleep between about 7 p.m. and midnight. So getting your baby to sleep earlier than say 9 or 10 p.m. is actually meaning they're getting a better chance for a longer stretch of that deeper sleep. So that is more beneficial to your baby. Often it's going to come down to your baby's nap structure in the day. If your baby is having a long sleep later in the day, they're actually just not going to be tired enough to go to bed really any earlier than 9 or 10 p.m. And so we sort of aim to have a really long nap across the middle of the day, and then a shorter nap if your baby's still on 3 naps a day in the afternoon, so that they're really ready for bed at 7 and will settle well and sleep for a good long stretch at that point. Often what can happen too is if your baby's body clock is set sort of a bit later, so maybe they're sleeping later in the morning, so maybe they're not waking till 8 or 9 in the morning. And then of course, if you're looking at say a 12-hour chunked as their day, they're not going to be ready to go to sleep until a lot later that night. So we encourage people to wake their baby, if they're not already awake, by 7 in the morning, and that helps establish a wake-up time, a consistent wake-up time, which helps your baby's body clock click in and go, yep, 7 o'clock's morning, that's when I start my day, and 7 o'clock at the night, 7 p.m. is bedtime. So a couple of those sort of things, they're napping, waking them at 7, is really going to help your baby get on track for having their daytime hours during the daytime, and their nighttime is for sleep. Weaning off night feeds is a bit of a complicated area. First of all, it is very, very, very normal for your baby to still be having feeds in the night, especially until they're well established on solids. So I'm not gonna tell you that your 2-month-old baby needs to be weaned off night feeds. But just because a baby's waking overnight doesn't always mean that they're hungry. So the easiest approach to take is to start ruling out the other reasons for the waking, because like I said, it's not always hunger. And it's quite easy to rule out some other things first before then looking at tackling any kind of night weaning. So what I would rule out initially would be that your baby's waking isn't being caused by them having had too much or too little day sleep, or their naps aren't at quite the right times during the day to promote really good sleep overnight. I would be looking at their sleep environment, so that if they're a younger baby that they're still swaddled and it's not that's waking them. You could try using some white noise overnight to help your baby sleep a bit more deeply and link their cycles together. So once you can sort of rule out those other reasons for the wakes, then you can start to look at either maybe it's a settling issue, or maybe your baby still does genuinely need milk. What we aim to do, especially with our sleep programs, is make sure your baby is getting enough calories during their waking hours that it's less likely that they're going to need to feed overnight. So my youngest 2 children, for example, were both sleeping pretty much all night long from around 6 to 8 weeks old, and there's nothing that I actively did necessarily overnight to force that into them. If they'd woken, I would have fed them at that age, certainly, but I was able to make sure that everything else lined up for them, their naps, their room environment, and that they were getting enough calories in the day that they didn't need to feed in the night, and they did that by themselves. That was a very natural thing. And I am also going to say at that point that they were breastfed too, so I didn't suddenly start formula feeding my breastfed babies to make them sleep overnight. The point I want to make is that it can certainly happen if everything lines up right. So once you've looked at all of the other factors, you can start looking at when your baby is waking for a feed in the night. So if it's sort of 2 hourly, that's usually more of a settling issue once they're over about 4 months old. So especially if they're able to go longer than 2 hours between feeds in the day. What you can do in that situation is you can try resettling at 1 wake and then feed at the next. So if they will go back to sleep with you resettling them easily, then it's not hunger that caused that wake, because a hungry baby will genuinely not go back to sleep. And that's a really good way of figuring out whether it's hunger that's waking them or whether it's something else. What we would look at doing with an older baby is certainly reducing one of those feeds a night, 1 feed at a time. So we'd sort of resettle at one of them until that feed was gone, and then we'd look at the next one. And in that way, your baby is changing around the way that they are taking in their calories as well, because what can happen is if your baby's having a lot of milk overnight, they're genuinely not hungry enough to take as much milk in the day. So we want to gradually swap that around. You don't just want to go cold turkey on any night feeds, which means that maybe your baby's was genuinely needing that milk overnight because they're not getting so much in the day. Our sleep programs can talk you through that whole process, and in actual fact, a lot of the time, like I said, it's as simple as making a few easy changes, and you might find that those night wakes dramatically reduce as a result anyway.
So when your baby goes to sleep in the evening, they start off by doing a couple of 45-minute sleep cycles, and then they go into their deeper 2-hour sleep cycles. So if your baby is waking after the first sleep cycle after going to bed, it could be that their nap structure needs changing through the day, and they're not actually tired enough to go to sleep for longer, and they are actually treating bedtime as another nap rather than actually going to sleep and having their long chunk of sleep at night time. So it could be that they're overtired, undertired, and that their naps need changing. It could be that they don't know how to sleep independently, and that for an older baby that they are looking for that sleep association that they went to sleep with in the first place, and they're calling out and letting you know that they need that, they're tired and that they need to go back to sleep. For a younger baby, it's probably that they're hungry and that they didn't have a good feed before bed, especially if they're going through a growth spurt. They could have been cluster feeding, and that they aren't actually, they didn't get enough milk before their bedtime, and that they want a little bit more to have a decent sleep at night time. And also it could be that they're in pain or they're sick. I know my own children, that was always the first sign of my little ones having an ear infection. They would wake up after 45 minutes, cry, and that was always my first indicator. So if you're looking at tweaking the nap structure, which is probably the easiest thing to figure out first and see if that was the reason why your baby is waking after 45 minutes, then our sleep programs go through the perfect amount of daytime sleep and night to aim for a decent chunk of sleep overnight, and so that your baby will hopefully not wake after 45 minutes.
At 10 months old, babies aren't capable of having nightmares as we know them. Nightmares are something that is an imagination response, and so imagination doesn't develop in children until a lot later, probably over 2 years old. And until your child knows about fear or cognitively learns rational and irrational fear, they're not capable of imagining something to be afraid of. So your 10-month-old won't be going to sleep and having a nightmare about, a monster coming and stealing them out of their room, or things that my 4-year-old son might have a nightmare about. Babies this age are not capable of that kind of mature thought process, especially an unconscious one when they're asleep. So what is most likely happening in a baby that age is if he's waking and screaming or calling out for you or crying or really unhappy or unsettled, there's something else going on, and I really don't think it's nightmares. So the first place you would start to look is what's happening in his daytime that's affecting him overnight. And it might be that he needs some changes made to his nap structure, because maybe he's waking overnight because he's really overtired and he's not quite getting the right amount of nap hours in the day, and he's waking and he's really tired, but because of the hormones that circulate through our bodies when we're overtired, he's unable to kind of switch off and go back to sleep. So he's just upset because he does want to go back to sleep, but he just doesn't know how to. He might also be waking at this age, maybe there's a settling situation that needs some addressing. So if he's being put to sleep at the start of the night by a parent actively settling him to sleep by sort of rocking or feeding, and then he's waking overnight and you're not there, he's, that at that age that is going to cause a baby some distress, because they're old enough to be aware of what's going on, and they're aware of their surroundings, and they're aware of that you were there when they went to sleep, and they've naturally come out of a nighttime sleep cycle and you're not there, and you're not rocking them or feeding them, and they're alone and they're just uncertain, and they want you to come back and give them that association that they need in order to go back to sleep. And in a younger baby, that kind of thing can definitely happen, but it might just be grizzling, maybe a bit of crying and unsettled behaviour. But in an older baby, it can certainly mean that your baby will escalate quite quickly to your baby screaming or seeming like they're in pain or like they've had a nightmare, because they just want to get you back there to put them back to sleep, and that's the only way they know how. So I would first look at what's happening in your baby's day, make sure their napping is all lined up to be really, really age appropriate, so that's not having an impact on their nighttime settling and sleep. And then I would also be looking at your baby's settling ability and the situation there. And if you need some help with either of those things, our sleep programs have got all the information you need.
Now, melatonin is a super important hormone that is produced for a biological response for us to sleep and sleep well. Now, younger babies under 8 weeks old have maternal melatonin left over from when they were inside the womb, whereas after 8 weeks old, babies start producing their own melatonin. After they're 8 to 12 weeks of age, you'll notice that a newborn baby might not have that sleepy newborn phase, and they'll start waking more. So melatonin is only produced in the dark, and it is a response generally once your body drops in core temperature at night time, there's less light, less stimulation. Back in caveman days when there weren't artificial lights, we would start producing melatonin after dusk because there were no lights around to artificially prolong daylight period. If we put our babies to bed at 7 o'clock, they would generally sleep pretty well from 7 till midnight, which is when we have the highest amount of melatonin through our bodies. So then after midnight out, the melatonin will start to reduce, and around 5 a.m. is when it is mostly worn off, and that is again when we can start ending up with an early morning waking with our babies. So melatonin is very important. You won't get as much melatonin in your body if you are overtired, and you obviously don't get melatonin either in your body if you're undertired because it hasn't started to release yet. So melatonin, very important if you want to be able to sleep well and sleep for long periods. If you want to head to our website, there's loads of information on how to get your baby to sleep well, free articles and videos, and we've got loads of videos just like this one on our YouTube channel as well.